China says it will support plans to expand the Brics Club of large emerging economies. Leaders from Brazil, India, China and South Africa are meeting for 3 days in Johannesburg amid surging interest in the group. The alliance accounts for 40% of the world's population and a quarter of its GDP. At least 23 countries, including Iran and Argentina, have formally applied to join Brics. President Ramaphosa says he shares China's view on expanding the alliance.
President Xi Jinping and I discussed the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine and its significant impact on developing economies in Africa and elsewhere. We both agreed on the importance of dialogue and negotiation between the two sides. As South Africa, we are encouraged that President Xi Jinping has welcomed the peace mission to Russia and Ukraine initiated by African leaders.
While the leaders of Brazil, India and China are meeting in person for the 15th BRICS summit, Russia's President Vladimir Putin is participating virtually. It follows an international criminal court warrant for the Russian leader's arrest related to alleged war crimes in Ukraine. Instead, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov will take his place. Putin spoke in a pre-recorded speech denouncing sanctions against his country.
Repeatedly said that our country is able to substitute Ukrainian grain both on a commercial basis and in the form of gratuitous aid to the countries in need, especially since we are again expected to have an excellent harvest this year. As a first step, we have decided to send 25 to 50,000 tons of grain to each of 6 African countries free of charge, including free delivery of these cargoes. The international economic situation is also being seriously affected by the illegitimate practice of sanctions, the illegal freezing of the assets of sovereign states, and, in fact, the violation of all the basic norms and rules of free trade and economic life that seemed inviolable not so long ago. The irreversible, objective process of de-dollarization of of the members of Brics, economic ties is gaining momentum, and efforts are being made to develop effective mechanisms for mutual settlements and monetary control. As a result, the share of the dollar in export-import transactions within the Brics is declining. Last year it amounted to only 28.7%.
BRICS summit still ongoing in Johannesburg, South Africa. We talked about this yesterday. This is a developing story. Okay.
Yeah, it is a developing story. There is definitely signs of crack in the wall within Brics, and there is a number of people who are proposing or who are making it clear that expansion at this point might not be a good idea, and a number of reasons, I can't remember off the top of my head some of the reasons that have been highlighted why expansion should not be their move. Let them consolidate first, especially in the light of what is going on between Russia and Ukraine. So Russia has got to sort out the problem with Ukraine. If that was not in existence, then BRICS will be a big bride that most of the other developing countries will want to join, because there are so many countries that are worried that the way the United Nations is going, it will just be all about America and Europe. But for you to be in a position to say you want to join BRICS, you look at what Russia is doing to Ukraine, and you're beginning to think another superpower is evolving and building its own bloc. For what reason? For the reason of just being able to extend its own power and not necessarily to help you. China, yes, is doing whatever it can, and the second largest economy in the world, and it's doing everything to make sure that it consolidates its position. But BRICS has to just focus on building its own bridges and sorting out its own internal issues, and then making sure that they stand firm on Russia getting away from this Ukraine war that is not helping anybody. Russia is not helping anybody with this, and it's affecting BRICS, I think.
All right, we're fine.
So the expansion thought about BRICS is well on its way, and this is a bright time for BRICS. BRICS is doing very well, and the numbers are there to prove it. Dilma Rousseff is the chair of the Brics Bank, which is called the New Development Bank. And in fact, she said there are about 15 countries that are already applied to join Brics. And they're taking their sweet time to be able to pick about 5 of them to come to the fray. For last year, for instance, they earmarked about $10 billion worth of loans for the country. And what they say with their argument is that they are not going to be like the World Bank that gives you conditions. So everybody's free to come. And everybody wants to be on the bandwagon. Yes, I understand the Russian crisis and Ukraine crisis and all of that, but it's never been a very productive time for Brics, having the second largest economy of the world. You know, also having Brazil, a very veritable economy in the world, and other leaders out there. So it's a glowing time for, you know, Brics, and it is part of that their ideology to say, okay, let us look for alternative currencies to challenge the dollar. Because we all know how the dollar emerged. Pretty much was after the Second World War and the strength of the dollar increased and Bretton Woods and all of that. But Brics is saying, we even want to start lending in Chinese yuan and real, in Brazilian real. So the expansion of Brics is surging on big time. That summit they're having in South Africa is an affirmation. 15 countries are saying we want to join. They haven't taken their sweet time to say, okay, before you come in, let's weigh things. And I'm sure the Americans are looking on the other side and saying, oh, these guys are really, really top in the charts, because other people have tried to put in all sorts of union. It's not worked. If my memory serves right, I think it was former French President Sarkozy or thereabout that tried starting up a little union called the Mediterranean Union and all of that. It didn't really fly as much as, you know, BRIC. So it's about how countries can look the way of this. But when you also look at the argument, on the grand scheme of things, they talk about probable disconnect with Americans. We tried it here at some point. We tried having a partnership with, you know, the Chinese for their renminbi and all of that, for export and all of that. I don't know how that went, but the American frowned at that. So it's just in that world supremacy ideology fight. You know, there's something called the Peloponnesian Wars in Greek mythological history. And many political philosophers have written about something called the Thucydides trap, which is the fight for supremacy, you know, and two nations want to usurp each other. That Thucydides trap has been going on between China and America for a while. And if China has some allies in BRIC, then it will help them a great deal. And they've coalesced efforts, even in the Russian war. You can see the reason why Russia has been able to stabilize, because when the other parts of the West stopped buying their oil, the likes of India and China were still buying their oil big time. So BRIC is on the resurgent form, and probably maybe some African countries. I don't know the list of the 15 that want to join, but probably you'll be shocked to find countries like, maybe we as a country might be angling to join. I don't know what it's going to be. But you know, we have close, you know, we have close partnership with Americans.
Yeah, actually. Yes, absolutely correct. In terms of BRICS, we had mentioned this yesterday that some of what would be on the agenda would be one, expansion, two, the New Development Bank, and perhaps conversation around a localized currency that unites the member nations of BRICS, and wanting to moderate America's influence and power in geopolitics. That's really what the agenda is. And as you said, I think it's just spot on. Fight for supremacy. This challenge of America as a superpower, the West as a superpower. And they do seem to be gaining some ground. Last year, $30 billion in loans to member nations of BRICS. That is attractive for any nation to want to be a member of that, of the body. And don't forget as well that with the stringent conditions of the World Bank and IMF, for struggling nations, it is attractive. And you don't even have to struggle, because I hear Saudi Arabia is said to be one of those countries angling to be, you know, a member of BRICS. A number of other countries are said to also have formally applied and are looking to also be members of BRICS. We see Russia, China is said to be the biggest beneficiary of this, being currently the second largest economy in the world. Also the trade war between China and America, they'll be looking to consolidate on that. So definitely they're open to having more people join and strengthening the power and influence of BRICS. It hasn't yet been decided, it must be said, whether they will formally adopt these nations or welcome these nations. And on the lighter side, I wonder what the name would be. Would it still remain BRICS if they do admit these other nations? Because of course we know that BRICS is an acronym for the founding members of the body: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. South Africa being the only African country in that particular bloc. Will they be looking to invite more people I doubt it very much if Nigeria would join at this point or would apply to join at this point because of diplomatic relationships with America and the United Kingdom. However, we must also point out the fact that we have also entered into some really significant trade deals with China. So that might also be an incentive. And we've talked about a number of times how we need money. We need to, borrow, do a bit of borrowing, despite the fact that it's not ideal. But because of where we find ourselves in terms of the foreign reserves, we might have to borrow to fund some of the projects that we currently have, and of course to stabilize the naira. We might see Brics as an opportunity to lend us that money without the stringent conditions tied to it. But so perhaps it will also challenge the World Bank, challenge the United States in terms of trying to woo and sustain relationships with countries that they currently enjoy, so that they don't go over the Brics side of life. We'll continue to watch. At the end of the summit, we will obviously have updates on that, whether it will be formally adopted as the countries being, to the expansion of Brics. We'll move on to our next.